Hey there, folks. It's Nate, and welcome to the Iron Sysadmin Open Source News Recap for the week of November 14th. Let's get right into it. All right, our first article comes from the News Stack. FFmpeg to Google. Fund us or stop sending bugs. All right, so there's so many layers to this particular news article, and I really don't know if I can cover them all. I suggest you go read the article, but I'm going to cover some high points. The story here is that Google, leveraging an AI code assistant to evaluate, I suppose, projects that they're interested in or projects that they leverage, has identified probably many bugs, but in this case, a bug in FFmpeg that's related to, processing an older video codec from an old LucasArts game, which really seems a little bit irrelevant. But of course, they filed it as a bug against FFmpeg, which they leverage for things like YouTube and Google Chrome. Now, if you're not familiar with FFmpeg, it's a video processing and rendering library / toolset that is completely free and open source, and it's leveraged in a lot of things you'd probably recognize, like Amazon Video, Google, Plex, VLC, Google Chrome, Firefox, all kinds of things. This thing is sort of the foundation or the groundwork for which a lot of media players and whatnot parse and convert and play media, right? But it's this small community-backed open source project, and it's not funded by a company. Now, I'm sure there's probably developers from companies that do use FFmpeg that are contributing back to the project. I don't know for certain about FFmpeg specifically, but I know that a lot of projects that we leverage within Red Hat Enterprise Linux, we do the same thing. We have engineers that are paid to go and make sure that not only is Red Hat giving back to those communities, but we're also we get some we get a certain measure of control over getting the bugs fixed that we really care about. Apparently, Google's not doing that. They're just filing these bugs. I don't know if that's unanimously true, if that's every project that they work with, but this article highlights FFmpeg specifically. Anyway, so FFmpeg is, they receive this bug request. Google has this Project Zero, and they disclose their bugs that they've reported within, what some people are saying are irresponsible timeframes, especially for these smaller open source projects. And that's also one other layer of this article. A company like Google and a platform like YouTube that makes a bunch of money. I mean, we're talking billions, maybe trillions of profits, right? A project like FFmpeg is proposing that when Google or companies like Google submit bugs to these projects, that they should be expected to include bug fixes as well, right? So here's some code that should fix the problem. They should submit that as a proposed fix for the bug, instead of just reporting the bug and then starting the clock ticking on this disclosure timer. Because obviously when bugs are disclosed against a project, it makes the project look worse. So there's a certain amount of pressure on the project to fix the bug. So in this case, to submit it and then start this clock ticking when they have the weight of a company like Google and a name like Project Zero, and obviously Google is a tech company. Why can't Google submit code to fix these problems instead of just submitting them to these, volunteers that are maintaining these projects? So, this is, I think it really highlights the role that large companies, especially tech companies, can play in open source. And it seems like some of them just choose not to. This also raises a question as to how valuable are these AI code analysis generated bugs, right? So if I have an AI that's monitoring or that's evaluating code and it identifies a bug, do I just submit that bug, or do I have a certain amount of responsibility to evaluate whether that bug is actually of any value before I go ahead and submit it? Do I need to validate that bug before I submit it? I think these are all valid questions that people need to answer if they're going to be doing code analysis via AI. And before they go and submit those bugs, they need to really think about this Think about the actual impact to the project they're submitting it to, especially if they're going to send this whole swath of reports, which I don't know if Google is doing that, but I've heard from other small communities and small projects that they are, in fact, getting hit with a bunch of bug reports now that we have these AI code analysis tools because of people that are trying to use them for bug bounties, or maybe some other people who are actually just well-intentioned and they're trying to improve these projects. So what do you think? AI code analysis and, how responsible do large companies like Google need to be when they're not only reporting bugs, but submitting fixes perhaps? Are they obligated? And how responsible do they need to be about disclosing those bugs to the public? All right, this is the part of the show where I remind you to like and subscribe if you're watching on a platform like YouTube or like PeerTube, which, by the way, did you know we're on PeerTube? You can find us at video.ironsysadmin.com. If you're watching on one of those platforms, make sure you like and subscribe so that you can get notified when I make more or when I produce other content. Also, if you're not listening audio only and you would like to, then you should be aware that we're also releasing this show as a podcast. So you can find the Iron Sysadmin or the Iron Sysadmin News Recap on the places where you normally find podcasts. I currently have it hosted on a federated platform, which is pretty cool, called Castopod, and that actually publishes out to places like Apple Podcasts and the other places that you'd expect to find podcasts. So check it out. All right, on to our next article. This one's pretty close to home for me. Red Hat has announced RHEL version 10.1 and version 9.7. I've spent most of my week presenting to people the deck that I had to help create to announce the RHEL 10.1 and 9.7 releases. So I won't belabor the point, but there is a press release linked in the notes for today's show. And of course, I'm showing it right now on the screen, but there's a couple notable features that you might that you might be interested in. So some of the highlights of this release are validated hardware drivers for AI accelerators from NVIDIA, AMD, and Intel. Improvements around the command line assistant. If you haven't tried that, we've got this command line assistant built into RHEL, optional of course, which is AI backed. We've improved that service a bit. Soft reboots, which will let you reboot a machine without actually having to take it fully down and back up again. It's a systemd feature. And progress toward post-quantum crypto. So we brought that from RHEL 10 back into RHEL 9 as well. So go check it out if you're interested in Red Hat Enterprise Linux. All right, our next article comes from Phoronix. Canonical is now providing up to 15 years commercial support for Ubuntu LTS releases. And I guess, to join the usual crowd of long-term support for enterprise-grade Linux distributions, Ubuntu, or Canonical, I should say, is now joining that crowd with up to 15 years. They said this will go into effect with the Ubuntu 14.04 LTS and newer versions of LTS. So if you're running Canonical's Ubuntu, or if you're using Canonical for support for Ubuntu, and you need that long-term support, which are now offered by lots of Linux vendors, check it out. You can now run Ubuntu for up to 15 years. All right, our next article also comes from Phoronix, and this is from the Linux gaming world. If you didn't see the announcement, this came out on Wednesday as well. Valve has a whole bunch of announcements around new hardware in their Steam ecosystem. That is the same ecosystem as the Steam Deck, right? So they've announced three major things. One of them is a new Steam controller. I don't know if you remember, but they did a Steam controller a while back. I never owned one or even saw one. I don't know much about it. But this is meant to work with Steam games. It's got this cool little docking/charging system that allows you to connect to your PC. They released their own announcement on this, and they go into a little bit more details about the controller, but it has all the same controls that you expect from the Steam Deck if you've ever used one. There's buttons on the back of the thing, and of course the shoulder buttons, and even 2 integrated touchpads, just like the Steam Deck has. There's also the Steam Machine, which is basically a Steam Deck in a box, but they're suggesting that it's about 6 times more powerful than a Steam Deck handheld. They say it can run 4K games on large sets, like on an actual television set, and it's basically a Steam Deck, an overpowered Steam Deck, right? It's got a GPU, it's got an AMD Ryzen and a specifically made AMD GPU. Pretty cool desktop class hardware, not the mobile stuff that you find inside of the Steam Deck. So, this is kind of the next step in Steam gaming in what feels more like a console world. So that's pretty cool stuff. And some big news. There have been leaks and whatnot around a device that Valve has been calling Deckard for a very long time, which is basically a kind of the next iteration of their VR hardware. I suppose this is what's come out of those leaks. And this is a VR headset, wireless VR headset with controllers. It looks a whole lot like the form factor you'd expect from like a Meta Quest device, where you've got the wireless headset, and then you have smaller controllers like you see with the Meta Quest devices. And this also has a wireless controller that you plug into your PC that runs Wi-Fi 6 to give you the best performance possible for streaming VR games from your PC to the headset, which I think is pretty cool. I recently upgraded my VR headset to a big screen Beyond 2, and I'm very happy with that, don't get me wrong, but if I knew about this, I might have thought twice about buying the big screen, because this looks like a pretty cool device. I guess we'll see once it hits the market. All of these announcements, they say, are slated for early 2026, so maybe we'll see more about them when they are actually released. All right, when I saw this article, I couldn't not cover it. This actually comes from the United Nations website. I know, right? This is a tech show, and I'm talking about the United Nations, but bear with me. Mind over machine. UN urges ethical guardrails for brain tech revolution. Okay, so we all love tech gadgets, and we all have things like smartwatches that are reading our vitals and whatnot all the time. And nobody really asks too many questions, or I should say most people don't ask too many questions about what's happening with that data. Now, there are some safeguards around health data. Of course, we've already got safeguards in place for things like private health data, but there's some gray area about, data that's collected by these personal devices, like your Apple Watch. And what the UN is concerned about here is, one, people don't really understand the implications of their own privacy, right? So look at social media. Social media truly abuses your privacy. It's monitoring you, it's building a profile on you, and it's trying to use that data to both sell for profit and to advertise at you so that they can make money off of advertisers and off of businesses based on that private data, right? Now, imagine if those companies actually could read your brain waves. Think about that, right? Now, I don't think we're there yet. Maybe we are. But there are devices out there today that you can pop on a headband and you can control a device. I saw one where they were cat ears. You could put the cat ears on and then they would react to your emotions, supposedly, to make the cat ears react in the way that, cat ears would. But that may be a little bit of a gimmicky example. But, imagine somebody who uses a brain device to control a prosthetic arm, for example, right? Is the data that's collected by the headband that they have hooked up to their skull, is that private data? And if that data is private, then who's governing who's allowed to use it and what they're allowed to do with it, right? So this is, we're sort of on the cusp of what could be new technology that can actually interact with our brains. And the technology is moving faster than lawmakers can write policy around it. So the UN is a little bit concerned about this, and the representative, they don't name who it is unless I missed it in the article. I recommend you go read the article, by the way. But the representative in the UN basically wants to raise these concerns before they're a problem. So I think that's pretty valid. Okay, and our last article for today comes from investing.com. Again, I'm going a little bit off the beaten path here, but bear with me. Bybit is apparently a company that well, I don't know exactly what else they do, but they're the ones that sponsored this particular, they're the ones that ran this particular study. Bybit's Lazarus Security Lab reveals hidden fund freezing functions across 16 major blockchains. So if you are into cryptocurrencies, you may want to care about this particular article. So basically what they found was, well, they used an AI assisted code analysis along with manual review. They revealed, like I said, 16 major blockchains include code that allows them to freeze or restrict user funds. They used an AI code analysis assistant along with manual review to uncover 3 different types of freeze mechanisms. A hard-coded one that's hard-coded into the blockchain, a configuration-based, which is managed through validator and foundation settings. I don't know enough about blockchain to tell you what those terms mean, but maybe you do. And an on-chain contract freezing, which is executed via system contracts. The study also noted a number of cases where these were used to stop fraud, abuse, and theft. So I can't really argue that these are bad things. I think it's great that they can leverage these freezes to do things like prevent abuse. But the study also suggests that transparency around these mechanisms is important and should become a core pillar of blockchain governance. So, with things like Bitcoin being these unregulated currencies, that aren't owned by governments, it really is, I don't know, it gives you this feeling of kind of the wild, wild west where there's no controls and there's no protections. And this article kind of makes me believe that, yes, in fact, there are protections and there are people watching and there are people who can freeze those funds. It's not as anonymous as everybody thought it was. We've already found that out. And now we find that these funds can actually be frozen, similar to bank accounts. So I don't know. Is blockchain and cryptocurrency really the freedom that we all thought it was? Seems like just another financial system to me. All right, and that is it for today's news recap. I want to thank you all for watching. Like I said earlier, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you haven't already checked it out and you would like to consume this in audio only, check us out on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Google Play, whatever they're calling it now, Google Podcasts, whatever. Oh, Google's YouTube Music, I think is what they list us on now. And, wherever you find podcasts. If you can't find us somewhere, let me know. I'll look into getting us added there as well. And again, thanks for watching. I'll catch you in a week.